But in a situation where you find that a person look at this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, let's start with a Daily Trust today, the 4th of April, 2022. And, the paper today is quite, heavy. It's 56 pages. Now, we have the lead story here that says how NRC ignored warnings on planned attack on Abuja-Kaduna train. Writers here says leaked letters reveal alerts to railway months ahead. Repeated intelligence reports show attack coming. MD admits receiving letter, says suspension not the solution. And this particular story was written by, our very own Abdulaziz. And just, briefly in 1 minute, just tell us about this this particular story and why it's the lead.
Well, it's like a follow-up to a story done by Daily Trust, published on Thursday, which reveals that there was indeed information saying that this attack was imminent, that there are plans to launch attack on these train services. And then, of course, nothing was done to avert it. And so today's lead story is taking a step ahead and giving some more details, specific details about how since November last year, there were warnings, especially to the Nigeria Railway Corporation, to suspend the evening train rides because it is susceptibility to, it was prone to attacks. And of course, evidently, the warning was not heeded to, leading to the very unfortunate incident of March 28th, which, is a lot of us are still mourning. Because, as we said we read during the news brief, a lot of families are grieving, loved ones that are either killed or with
some are still abducted.
Exactly.
All right. We'll move on to more of the stories on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper. We have 12 people, 19 cattle killed in Plateau attacks. Details of that on page 4. How PRP will produce Buhari's successor, says Falalu Bello. Police gun down 3 kidnappers, rescue victims in Kano Forest. And right beside these stories, we have a pictorial of Vice President Yemi Osinbajo exchanging pleasantries with Lady Christine Dojau Tedola during her 90th birthday and church dedication of St. Peter's Catholic Church built by Harry Negbe, Lagos, yesterday. And we also have on the footnote there, ACF, Afenifere reply El Rufai warns against use of mercenaries. If you come to the top of the page, you have Nigeria targets 12.4 trillion naira from non-oil commodities, says NEPC. RCCG says Adeboye denies mobilizing for Osinbajo any presidential aspirant. Now, these are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
Up next is the leadership newspapers. And the lead story for leadership this morning says, rising insecurity, hiring mercenaries not an option. Our troops are capable. CSOs. That is some civil society organizations lending a voice on the debates about whether to hire foreign mercenaries or not in the fight against insecurity. And some of the writers to this big story say, ask FG to change security tactics. Recall our ex-servicemen, says Khan. Calls for mercenaries worrisome, Afenifere. Ohaneze AYCF back call says it is long overdue. ACF Northern Coalition caution against making political capital out of the crisis. These are all parts of the lead story in today's leadership. Up there, there is a business story that says Nigerian ports lose 5.4 trillion in 5 years to absence of single window. It's a story which starts on the front page and continues on page 7. On the right side bar of the paper, ECOWAS court nullifies Section 24 of Nigeria's Cybercrime Act. And this is one act that a lot of people complain that it hinges on, it infringes on people's rights. And for details of what the section that was abolished by the ECOWAS Court is all about, we can read the leadership newspaper. The story is on page 8. Next, second Niger bridge, FG commends NSIA, Julius Berger on quality of work. This is on page 6. And then 2 students develop technology to check rail vandalization. This is a story also on page 8 of the leadership. At the top of the leadership front page, Hush Puppy, U.S. court fixes October 11 for Abba Kyari's trial. A story on page 6. Then government kill 10 in Plateau, ISWAP execute 4 fishermen in Borno, on page 6 of today's leadership. On a sad note, on the front page of this paper is the announcement or the death being reported of the mother of founder of Leadership Newspapers Group, Mr. Sam Nda Isaiah, that is Eunice Ndanusa Isaiah, who died over the weekend. And the story here says PMB mourns Leadership founder's mother. The story is on page 7.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the next paper, which is Blueprint newspaper. And the lead story here says, with 11 months to 2023 polls, APC will clear cloudly atmosphere to victory, says Adamu. And we have writers that says, I've never captained a failed ship. Promises party will move against anything that can cause failure, and there's no way we can stop this electoral process because of security challenges. Details of that particular story on page 6. We also have at the top of that page, train attack, 170 passengers safe, 21 still missing, 7 coaches recovered, says NRC. And we have some riders, 25 Kebbi captives held after 10 million naira ransom. Wage total war against terrorists, ACF tells federal government. If you come down, you'd see second Niger bridge, FG releases 157 billion naira, says project ready August. And we also have some pictorials there. We have one of the non-executive director, Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, Kabir Oniyangi, Minister of Budget, Finance and National Planning, Zainab S. Ahmed, during a recent inspection of the second Niger Bridge project linking Asaba to Onitsha in Delta and Anambra states, respectively. And we also have a picture of Inspector General of Police Usman Babal Ali with some senior police officers during the IGP's visit to some of the Monday night's attack by bandits in Abuja-Kaduna train at Rijana. All right, below that pictorial, we have Dangote fertilizer to train over 1 million farmers in 3 years. Details of that on page 26. We also have our project in 35 African countries gulped $10 billion, says AFC. Oshun monarch to subjects. Fear of Fulani herders forced me out of town. On page 23, voting. We are shortchanged, says NAS Southeast Caucus. Nigeria's position in Africa under threat as oil production crashes. We also have unity of the country supersedes zoning, says Saraki. And details of that on page 23. These are some of the stories on the front page of Blueprint newspaper.
We move on to the Nation newspaper. And on the front page of the Nations today, ACF to federal government, wage total war on terrorists, bandits. The story has 2 riders. One says, Forum opposes use of mercenaries. Government intensify killings, arson in Anambra, Imo. To the right, 13% diversion, RMAFC, that is Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, shuts out Lagos, Okes, Anambra, Kogi. On the top of the Nation today, PDP governors twisted facts on Buhari's government, says presidency. The story on page 3. Diesel crisis may shut down economy, says man Seyman Nasima. That is, this is the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and Nigerian Chamber of Commerce, talking about the crisis in the energy sector. To the right of that story, 400 houses in resettlement cities near completion on page 26. And another story there says, Bola Igemada Omishore replies Professor Shoyinka. This is a story on page 6 of the paper, and following from the statement by Nobel laureate Professor Wole Shoyinka at the weekend, in which he was lambasting the appointment or condemning the appointment of or the emergence of Chief Iola Omishore as the National Secretary of the ruling party, APC, saying that that somehow forecloses investigation into the murder of Bola Ige. So now Omishore is responding to that. Still on the nation, at the very center of the page is a pictorial of Vice President Yemi Oshibanjo exchanging pleasantries with Lady Christian Dola Oitola during her 90th birthday and dedication of a church in Epe, Lagos. Just below that, another story says INEC unveils plan for Ekiti Oshun polls. Senator Oshomole in battle for slots. So it seems that Adams Oshomole, the former national chairman of the APC, may be going to the Senate. These and many other stories will be found in today's The Nation newspaper.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the Punch newspaper. And we have a lead story that says PDP backs Obasanjo Adeboye's fears over killings 2023 elections. We have some riders that says Buhari government overwhelmed. Nigerians no longer safe on roads, train, airport, says ex-president. I'm not sure if 2023 elections will hold, says RCCG General Overseer, laments crude oil theft. Obasanjo Adeboye stating the obvious, Northwest governors organizing dubious amnesty, alleges PDP. And you can find the details of that story on page 2. The pictorial there is that's a pictorial of Islamic devotees during the break of fast at a free food distribution point on the first day of the holy fasting month of Ramadan in Karachi, Pakistan on Sunday. All right, if you go to the top of the page, you see a story that talks about PENCOM to fine PFAs over pensioners' delayed payment, others. Details on page 34. 2 million people start receiving 20 billion naira monthly from June, says federal government. Federal government grants 3-year tax relief to 33 companies, bars 10 firms. PDP politicians stole soldiers' salaries during tenure, says presidency. That is quite an accusation. All right, right below the, beside the templates, the nameplates, we have mercenaries call. Avoid fire brigade approach, hire volunteers and hunters, says ACF. We also have NDLEA, Customs seizes 9.5 million tramadol, 5 billion naira narcotics. If you come to the bottom of the page, gunmen kill 10, injure 19 in Plateau festival attack. CSOs tackle Emefiele over alleged involvement in politics. Gunmen storm Ogun Mosque, abducts policeman. 2 others demand 15 million naira. And we also have Makinde threatens lawsuit over 998 million naira contract inflation allegation. Details on page 8. Pastor's baby killed as wife, female members fight over alleged affair with cleric. Wow, really sad one there. And Sound. Family opposes Gandhi, alleges AFDB director excluded, demands fresh selections. These are some of the stories on the Punch newspaper.
Thank you, Usena. Now we move on to the Daily Times. On the front page, there is a lavish pictorial first, which attracts my attention. It says Vice President Osuwenjo celebrating with evangelist Ebenezer Obi Fabi Juju Mistro, Sashina Peter, and King Sonny Ade at the 80th birthday Thanksgiving of Fabi in Lagos on Sunday. This is an event of the weekend because a lot of people have already poured in encomiums for the music icon as he turned 80. Just below the pictorial, the major headline of Daily Times says, Insecurity, Buhari government overwhelmed. Obasanjo laments that Nigerians traveling no longer safe on the road, in the train, at the airport. On the top of the page of Daily Times, it says, Presidency rejects PDP fantasy communique. Says Buhari striving to fix mess from opposition parties' misrule. That's the long-standing back and forth between the opposition PDP and the ruling APC continuing on that note. These are some of the stories on the front page of the Daily Times of this morning.
All right, we'll take the final paper, which is Nigerian News Direct. And the lead story talks about traffic hike, multi-choice dares federal government, tribunal's judgment, Senate. And the writer says begins implementation of 15% price hike on DSTV, GoTV subscriptions, and details of that on page 2. This particular story has gotten a lot of Nigerians' attention, and
it's something that affects almost everybody.
Yes, yes.
Every
And
household.
Nigerians are actually complaining because most of the programming are repeated and they pay so much already. So why hike the price? And now we're seeing that, multi-choice, have no, like they're not ready. They're not ready to even
comply
reduce
with
or
that.
comply.
Yes, the multi-choice thing is something that, as you said, it attracts a lot of attention. And more importantly is the fact that a lot of people have been clamoring for a pay-as-you-go, alternative option,
yeah.
so that people who travel, who stay at home only for a few hours, will not be charged
as much as
those who like
hours.
exactly on the television, and which is a practice in many countries. But interestingly, the multi-choice has been resistant on this option.
But they're making so much money from that, so it's going to be a
but
very
of course,
difficult
also
change.
business peculiarities, as they say, who has the shoe is the person who knows where it pinches.
It hurts,
so,
yeah. Okay. All right, we'll move on. Right below the pictorial there, you'd see a story that says terrorism, no unregistered SIM cards on operators network. Telcos insist. Okay. More stories. Police intercept bus load of illicit drugs in Lagos, reject 500,000 naira bribe. That is a plus for the police there. OPEC target, Nigeria's 100,000 barrels output drops in March. We also have on train attack. NRC confirms 14 more passengers safe. If you go to the top of the page, you'd see a story on Dangote fertilizer to train over 1 million farmers in 3 years. NDLEA seizes 5 billion naira worth of tramadol in 3 states. And, these are some of the stories on the Nigerian News Direct. Yeah. All right, with that, we will be connecting virtually on the newspaper review with Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Daily Trust newspaper, Suleiman. Good morning and welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Good morning, Deshan, and thank for having me.
All right, let's start with the lead story on Daily Trust newspaper. We'd love to have your take on that, on how the Nigerian Railway Corporation ignored warnings on planned attack on Abuja-Kaduna train.
That's quite a serious one, because even Malan Nasir Arfai, the governor of Kaduna State, he mentioned this as an issue when he went to the presidency and was speaking to the press afterwards, that they wrote to the Nigerian Railway Corporation at least twice, and that they ignored their warnings that they should stop plying the routes at night. But I think the more important question is whether where the warning should have come from. whether the warning should have come from the Kaduna State government or from the federal government or from the security agencies, So maybe, for example, if the warning had, if it had been the military or the DSS or the police or any of these security agencies that had, in fact, sent the warning to the Nigeria Railway Corporation, perhaps their behavior would have been different, But either way, since they had received the warning from the government of Kaduna State, they ought to have at least acted on it by contacting other security agencies in the country, to find out what they are on, what the situation is, what does that mean, and so on. And it's really quite unfortunate that it is after a tragedy like this that we're having to do a post-mortem of all these things, frankly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Suleiman. Closely related to this is the statement by the ACF Afenifere following what the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, said on his visit to the presidential villa, threatening that governors from the north will resort to hiring mercenaries to fight this insecurity if the government is not if the federal government is not serious about it. Now, a lot of organizations, including the Ariwa Consultative Forum and Afenifere, is cautioning against the use of mercenaries in this fight. What's your own take? Do you think we have reached that level of helplessness, or what do you make of it?
First of all, we need to be very clear that the idea by the governor of Kaduna State that they are going to get any foreign mercenaries or anyone from anywhere in Nigeria to help, which people interpreted to mean mercenaries, but we need to get that very clear. This is entirely out of the frustration that the Kaduna State government and the governors of other states that are affected by this issue, Katsina, Sokoto, Zamfara, and so on, feel from or have been feeling for quite a while now over the almost inaction, one can say clearly, inaction by the federal government. So it's not like they are already planning to go and get mercenaries into the country also. He is warning that at some point, if the inaction of the federal government continues, if the silence of the federal government continues, then they will have no choice but to resort to the use of mercenaries, wherever they may come from. And why have not even thought of using mercenaries? Why has even the federal government itself not thought of that? Because it can and should. Because if it feels that its own soldiers cannot go into some places, or if it lacks the capacity or the manpower on the grounds, because soldiers are divided across many states in the country, then probably the federal government should also use mercenaries. But beyond this, I would say that when we have issues around security, maybe organizations like Afenifere and Pandev and ACF and all these ethnic-based organizations, they are probably not the best qualified platforms to be speaking about security issues, because in general, they tend to be divided. They tend to speak at opposite ends of the mouth. You can scarcely find any areas where Afenifere and ACF, for example, agree. You can scarcely find any areas where Ohaneze and ACF agree. So chances are that they will only worsen the politicization of security issues in the country. So probably these are not the best organizations to be speaking. But the real issue, the real concern, but that people should be talking about on this is not the threat of the use of mercenaries, but the inaction of the federal government. That's where the pressure, El-Rufai said that to pile more pressure on the federal government to act. And that's the direction that people should be talking about.
Now, okay.
Well, I wanted to say, away from security, Mr. Suleiman, the national chairman of the PRP, that is the People's Redemption Party, at the weekend, Alaji Falalu Bello, expressed confidence that his party will form the next government. And this is coming just a day after the Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello flagged up his campaign in a presidential campaign in Abuja. Looking at the political scene ahead of 2023 election, what do you see as do you think there's space for some of these perhaps younger platforms and persons amidst the gladiators in the APC and PDP? What are the chances for them?
Well, I think their chances are certainly brighter now than they were in all the previous elections we have had since 1999. My reason is because of the changes that we have had in the new Electoral Act 2022. Because you now have roughly 150 to 180 days of campaigning. That's a long time for a party like PRP to mount an insurgency campaign in which it can communicate to Nigerians, and its candidates can also communicate to Nigerians, can reach out to Nigerians, can campaign, can crisscross the entire country, and tell Nigerians, this is how we are going to be different from the APC, But if Falelu Bello and PRP really want to be taken seriously, I think what they need to do is not the kind of empty boast like political parties do that we are going to replace APC and so on, but to begin to speak to Nigerians now. They certainly have a chance, and the PRP is probably the oldest and most credible party in Nigeria, so they have somewhere to stand right now, So is to tell Nigerians, for example, how they are going to fix this security situation, how they are going to do the things that Nigerians want done that the APC government are not doing. That's what people want to hear. Once they can say a lot of that in the economy, in the security situation, but also around issues of corruption, around issues of jobs and employment, and rising prices of food, rising prices of fuel, and so many issues that affect Nigerians on a daily basis. If they have answers to these questions and they have a credible candidate or a credible slate of candidates, even at the federal government, but not just at the federal government, but also at local elections, at the states, and so on, I think they stand a good chance, because there is long enough time for them to campaign, for them to engage with Nigerians and be heard.
Now, talking about more hardship on Nigerians. Now, on Nigerian News Direct, that's the lead story. There's a story of tariff hike where MultiChoice dares federal government and tribunals judgment, and also Senate. So instead of reducing the cost of, subscription, they've begun implementation of a 15% price hike on DSTV and GoTV subscriptions.
Well, I don't really know. The thing is, once you have hikes in prices in one part of the market, what happens is that it spirals into other prices. But I'm just wondering exactly what would have increased in prices for MultiChoice that they needed to also increase the prices of their tariffs, because we have had MTN and Airtel and all these service providers for GSM and data. They have had retained the same prices for like a decade, if not longer, despite changes in everything else. They have not needed to increase their tariffs, in the way others do, because of the basic necessity of the services that they provide, but also because of the millions of people. So you don't need to make profit directly in terms of per unit price, but you make profit because of the sheer volume of the people that are using your service. DSTV and MultiChoice, they are in the same category. In fact, DSTV is even in a better category as a business, than MTN and Co, because it's a virtual monopoly in Nigeria. It monopolizes the market. The broadcast satellite broadcasting market. Almost entirely because all other service providers are not do not enjoy within Nigeria the kind of prestige or the kind of presence that DSTV enjoys among subscribers. So I don't think that the problem is even DSTVs. The problem is Nigerians and the federal governments for allowing a monopoly or a virtual monopoly in such a significant and crucial sector of the economy and society. Because communications also have to do with national security, has to do with so many issues that are in the Nigerian constitution, such as issue of representation, such as issue of voice to everyone in the country. You cannot allow a monopoly or any company to monopolize the market if you take your constitution seriously, because the constitution says that Nigerians should have access to communications of all kinds and in a way that is representative, that is equal, and so on and so forth. These are serious issues that mean in policy terms that you cannot have a monopoly. So if there's anything that government should be answering the DSTV for now, is to be thinking of how to break DSTV's monopoly. That's where the solution lies. Because once the DSTV continues to enjoy this monopoly, that's what monopolies do. They tell you stories, they dare you because they know that you don't have a choice. You don't have anyone capable of providing the same service that they do. So what the government needs to do is to break the monopoly of DSTV by inviting more players into the market that can offer the same services, including the sports that Nigerians love so much, which gives DSTV an edge over all other service providers.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Suleiman, Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Daily Trust. We hope to have you another time on the program.
Thank you, and thank you for having me too.
Listeners, that's been a newspaper review on the show this morning. Thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be back on the hour.
But in a situation where you find that a look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that